Immigration and the Christian Worldview. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Well, our subject is brought to our attention today by a June 23, 2020 article in the Wall Street Journal headlined, Trump's Immigration Gift to China. And the subtitle is, His Limits on Foreign Workers Will Send More U.S. Jobs Overseas. See, this is making the assumption that we make as economists, and this is scarcity. So workers are going to go somewhere. See, you can't make more or fewer workers. That's the economic assumption. There are these workers. We only have control of where they go. You can't make more or less. See, this is an economic assumption. They are scarce. So which ones do you allow into the country? Which ones do you push out of the country? And the Wall Street Journal editorial column on June 23 is correct. This is a gift to China. President Trump is chasing the best workers out of the country. So economically, this makes no sense. And we'll get to the Christian worldview in just a minute. Here's the first couple lines of that article. Quote, President Trump's economic agenda has always been marked by contradiction. He wants America to be the world's high-tech business hub, but then he closes off the human talent essential to stay globally competitive. That's the import of his order Monday, restricting legal work visas across the economy, end quote. You know, the Wall Street Journal is correct. We want the best people on our team. If you want the best people on your team, you want visas to allow people into the country who can create greater value. How we make these decisions I'll get to in a minute. But look, here's an interesting response. The article I just quoted was June 23. Here's another article on July 2nd in the Wall Street Journal. Headline, Boris Johnson offers millions in Hong Kong chance to immigrate to the UK. End quote. Good for you, Mr. Johnson. He understands the idea that the better thinkers you have in your country, the more successful your economy will be and everybody will profit. So Boris Johnson sees this correctly from the Christian economics worldview. President Trump seems to not see it correctly. Look, we have the other course I teach at the university called Strategic Management. We have an entire chapter on intellectual assets. The whole underlying assumption is that it's humans who make the world better. I mean, 70% of the U.S. economy is in services. These are where humans serve others. My recording number 32, you might look back at that, it's called Made in God's Image. I mean, the whole idea is that our creativity comes because we have a creator. The question today is, how do we get these creative people in our country so they can make lives better for all of us? Right? Here's another quote from that article about President Trump. Quote, keeping out high-skilled foreign workers will hamstring innovation, end quote, meaning it will hamstring innovation in the United States. This is just very clear. Listen, okay, let me take you back to when you were a kid. You were playing sandlot football or basketball or baseball. You had two teams. You picked teams, right? Didn't you pick the best players first? Of course you did. If you were the last player picked, sorry about that. I hope you've overcome it. But the best players get picked first. In this example, President Trump just said, I don't want the best players. Boris Johnson in the UK said, I'll take the best players. Who do you think's going to win this little sandlot game? This is just too simple, right? So when you choose the best first. Look, so we look at this from the Christian worldview and say, how should we determine immigration law? By economics or by family? Before 1965, it was mostly determined by economics, meaning a merit-based system. So people stood at the border, and we as a country said, okay, we'll let you in based on what contribution you can make to our team. We were choosing teams, just like you did in sandlot games, right? I doubt if any of you chose your brother or your sister who was a worse player. That's what happened in 1965. Immigration law changed from economics to family. And now the chained migration idea is that you can allow your family in. So in the Christian worldview of economics, we want to ask this question. Should the government favor performance based on economics or family relationships? The answer may surprise you a little bit because we tend to think there's this really interesting misunderstanding about the nature of families, churches, and government. I wrote a book in the year 2000 called Corporate Cults. And that the message of that was the government is not your family. There are things that your family should do. There are things that your church should do. There are things that your government should do. It is my view as a Christian economist that we have called the government our family and said our family should let more family members in. That doesn't seem to be accurate to me. It seems to me that the government should make economic decisions. Family decisions should not be made at the government level. They should be made at the family level and the church level. So if you can see these three levels of analysis from smallest to largest, families make some decisions, churches make some decisions, governments make some decisions. Government should make economic decisions. Families and churches should make family decisions. See, we've given up the role of family to the government, and this is the big error we've made. Look, we know that more people make a better world. There are currently 7.7 billion people in the world. And the world is better now than it's ever been. I mean, it's not my subject today, but worldwide destitute level poverty is under 10%. It's never been this way in the history of mankind. How could it be that somebody like Robert Malthus predicts 120 years ago, if you have more children, if you have more people, the world cannot sustain them. Yet today there's 7.7 billion, and we're better off than we've ever been. So this is scarcity and abundance, which is not really my subject today. But this is the error that seems that President Trump is making. He wants fewer high-skilled people on his team. His team will not perform well. So he also seems to say we want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. As an economist, my point is I don't care if people are doing manufacturing or services. I want them to do what creates the greatest value for their neighbor. Now, if that sounds familiar, one of my common phrases comes from Mark 12:31. Jesus said you have two great commands. First, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and spirit. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you love your neighbor, you want your neighbor to have the greatest value of services. Why would you deliver them a $20 service when you could deliver them a $50? Why would we allow somebody in the country who will create $20 in value for their neighbors when we could select somebody who provides 50? See, that's the rule that the government should make. Government should not be in the family business, but it is, and I think that's a big error. So back to our history. This changed essentially in 1965, right? And I hear this interesting comment. Well, we have to allow family members chain migration because we want families to be together. Yes, we do want families together, but who is we? Government should not be in that business. Individual families and perhaps churches should be in that business. Government should not. And have you ever thought about this question? What causes the family in the U.S. from leaving the U.S.? There's not restrictions on the border for leaving the U.S. And you assume as though those might be. The only way this family can be together under this strange assumption is for them to be together in the U.S. Well, that's not true at all. If this family makes the choice, the family makes the choice to be together as a family, they could be in many different countries. They don't have to bring family members to the U.S. to have their family together. It is not the government's job. The government is not your family, okay? So we're pretty clear that Jesus established there should be nations. Said the opposite way is easier. It's hard to find any scripture that said there should not be nations. One of his most violent acts was against the money changers in the temple court. Matthew 21:13, he said, "My house shall be called a house of worship for all nations." And as an economist, it's interesting that I focus more on the last part of that sentence, which is all nations. In other words, people were coming across borders to worship at the temple, and they had to exchange their money first, and then they had to buy sacrifices for the temple, like a dove. That was what Jesus' family bought for him. They were poor, so they bought a dove. So they had to make two financial exchanges there. Why? Because they crossed a border, because they immigrated into the country so that they could worship. So it's clear that Jesus suggests that nations should be there. And a nation without a border is not a nation. This is just too easy. It's not worth making the effort to explain that a country without a border is not a country. So if we accept that we're supposed to follow the government, Romans 13, 1-2 says, quote, "Obey the government, for God is the one who has put it there. There is no government anywhere that God has not placed in power. So those who refuse to obey the law of the land are refusing to obey God, and punishment will follow. That's the end of the citation from Romans 13. So Jesus sustained there should be nations. We should follow their orders. So the idea of illegal immigration clearly is not in the Christian worldview, that we are supposed to follow the rules of the nation in which we are. And from an economics point of view, we're supposed to select immigrants based on how they will serve their neighbor. The greater they serve their neighbor, the more we want them on our team. So it's quite clear that as a Christian economist, we want nations, number one. Number two, we follow the laws. Number three, we want people who will create the greatest value for their neighbors. Christian economics. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our slogan is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.